Unlike most worship song reviews, this one isn't just a shallow, subjective critique. It's a clinical deep dive using a combination of information theory, neurochemistry, theology, and musicology. I'm going to show you why the massive Chris Tomlin and Bethel hit Holy Forever is a masterclass in biological induction. This is a clinical manipulation technique that bypasses your critical thinking and triggers a theta-wave trance, leaving you highly suggestible and unable to worship in spirit and truth, or to teach and admonish one another. The danger is bigger than we realize, and it's so much more than just looking at the lyrics or the style of the music. We'll be doing an objective, fact-based, scientific and forensic investigation into not only the song itself, but also the ecosystem it sits within. We'll talk about Chris Tomlin's theology and associations as we follow the money trail all the way back to Bethel Church. Welcome to my channel. I'm Andrew. I've been a worship leader and I was a touring musician for many years. This has provided me with a valuable perspective on the problems facing churches all over the world every Sunday when it comes to the music they sing. My day job as a software engineering leader, combined with my music experience, allows me a unique input into this debate. You may not believe it, but these skills actually complement each other perfectly. After all, music is maths. Or is maths music? Either way, there has never been a thorough framework to test the worship songs we sing every Sunday in church. So we'll just have to ask, why not? I think we vastly underestimated the importance of the songs we sing. They are theology put to a tune after all, so just as strictly as we should be testing the sermons we listen to, we should be doing the same for our songs as well. I've become increasingly troubled by the lack of care that churches take with their musical worship of the Lord, and so, in true engineering fashion, I set about creating the most scientifically complete test I possibly could. I've given it the catchy title of LITMUS, which stands for Lyrical and Information Theory Music Utilization Score. It's a bit of a mouthful, but in simple terms, it helps churches choose songs that are theologically deep, suitable for congregational singing, and solely focused on the God we worship. This test framework is where 6 different specialist disciplines meet, contributing to the most thorough and scientifically objective measure of our church music ever created, as far as I know. Theology, neurochemistry, musicology, information theory, acoustics, and associations all create a set of coordinates which are then mapped on the LITMUS music matrix. This is a chart with 4 quadrants that provide a simple visual representation of the song itself. If a song is in the induction quadrant, it is absolutely to be avoided. Meditation and litany songs are useful in small doses, but the bulk of the songs we should be singing in church must sit within the anchor quadrant. These are songs that are doctrinally rich as well as musically sound. They do not manipulate our emotions or lead us astray, but rather they move our affections. So in which quadrant does Holy Forever sit? I hardly think I need to tell you that Holy Forever is currently the #1 song being sung in churches every Sunday, all over the world. So it's absolutely imperative that we analyze it thoroughly. Our evaluation will go through 5 stages. These pillars are the source test, information density, resolution integrity, cognitive friction, and the satiation border test. I'll explain what these are and how they work as we go through each one. So let's get started. For the source test, we're going to check where the song comes from, who wrote it, who publishes it, and so on. Songwriting credits go to Chris Tomlin, Jen Johnson, Brian Johnson, Phil Wickham, and Jason Ingram. These are all artists associated with the worship industrial complex. This is a collection of fake Christian organizations that have turned the worship of God into a product. It's a commercial assembly line that uses clever psychology, a deep knowledge of music and emotional experiences, and it all masquerades as a spiritual encounter. Consumers become just as hooked on this product as a drug user becomes hooked on heroin, and they keep coming back for more, helplessly addicted to a dopamine rush. They think they're having a vision of God, but it's literally just all in their minds. It's mass hypnosis on an industrial scale. If you think I'm being overly dramatic, just keep on watching. We'll start with Brian and Jen Johnson. They're married and in charge of Bethel Music, which rakes in the cash for Bethel Church via royalties paid by churches who sing their music, as well as through streaming platforms such as Spotify. Brian is Bill Johnson's son, and Bill is the head honcho of the whole shebang. Bethel is a family dynasty. So who's Jason Ingram? I'm not sure you've heard of him, but he's an integral part of this complex. He is perhaps the most prolific worship music composer on the planet. He has contributed to over 10% of the current top 100 worship songs being sung in churches worldwide every single Sunday, and he has at some point collaborated with almost every single other Christian artist out there. So don't you think we should be knowing more about him? He regularly collaborates with Bethel, Elevation Hillsong, and Passion, along with a host of other heretical religious organizations. He is certainly to be marked and avoided. Now the same goes for Wickham, unfortunately. Phil is again one of the most prolific worship artists in the world and often collaborates with many heretics. When your church pays the CCLI fees to use a song, money is being funneled straight back to fund the spread of the Bethel disease, which is heretical dominionist theology and the protection of serial abusers. Do you really want your money going to this? Or perhaps we should rather ask ourselves, as Christians, should our money be going to fund these people and what they're doing? Is it a wise use of the money that God has put into our care? Perhaps the worst part of singing songs that fail the source test is that churches are signaling to their people that the artists and organizations that created those songs are safe pasture for them. This is what I call the gateway drug effect. They hear a song that sounds good on a Sunday, they go home, look it up on the internet, and that's where they are exposed to the more troublesome teachings these artists endorse or provide a halo for. That represents the greatest danger as well as the worst failure by their pastors. Now we get to Chris Tomlin. We really do need to talk about him. He has a philosophy of worship that can at best be described as biblically ignorant and at worst just plain dangerous. Keep in mind that he is one of the most influential Christian artists in the world and has been for several decades. This is a person that many implicitly and automatically trust with the music in their churches, and that is unspeakably dangerous. It is an indictment against many shepherds, and while that sounds harsh, do they not have a duty of care for their flocks? Is it not them who will be held personally responsible by the Lord for what they allow in their sanctuaries? They should be guarding the sheep with their lives. It took me all of 5 minutes to find an article that shows just how dangerous Tomlin's theology is, without even considering his deep associations and ties to apostate organizations such as Bethel. According to this article, Chris Tomlin believes in two categories of corporate worship music: deliverance, which are cries for help, and transcendence, songs that elevate us beyond our circumstances. While this might occasionally be reasonable for private worship, it is an incorrect understanding of biblical corporate worship. Nowhere in Scripture do we find these types of worship being used in a corporate setting as the primary drivers of worship, and we should only follow what the Bible tells us to. Chris states that he was chatting with a mysterious and unnamed mentor and said, "This dialogue led to a powerful revelation about the nature of worship music. I therefore quite rightly ask, what revelation, and where can I see this philosophy of worship revealed anywhere in Scripture? It's not in there. And if it's not there, then where did this so-called revelation come from?" This philosophy obviously comes through in his music. That's simply how art works. You cannot separate the art from the artist. These songs are not created in a vacuum, and they should not be treated as if they were. That would be foolish, and here's why. It's because these unbiblical beliefs about worship result in actual real errors that deceive people. Here's an example. In the same article written by Chris, he specifically said of Holy Forever, "There's a song in heaven right now, angels praising God, singing Holy, 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 and our hope and prayer for this song and this album is that it will open up the heavens and bring that song down for the rest of us to experience here on earth." This might seem like a throwaway statement and a nice sentiment, but it's not. It's a category error. This is a reference to Revelation 4 verse 8, and Tomlin is assigning a song to us that is sung in heaven by four perfect, holy creatures who were not made in the image of God and were created for completely different purposes to us. Are we in heaven? Are we perfect and holy yet? Are we not made in the image of God? We are not cherubim. Dogs should not behave as cats, and cats should not behave as dogs. That's the category error. Also, I don't know about you, but I don't want heaven to come down here. I want to go to heaven and be with the Lord. That song is not for us to sing. We need songs that minister to us while we worship God in the specific way that God intended for us when he created us here on earth. Holy Forever fails the source test and should be immediately withdrawn from your church's worship set lists. But in case you're not convinced yet, let's carry on because there's more. There is so much more. I'll avoid boring you with all the maths and geeky sciencey stuff, so I'll leave out words like entropy, symbol transmission, and so on. And please ignore Claude Shannon's information entropy formula on the screen now. All you need to know is that this test measures the amount of doctrinal truth in the song's lyrics, along with the context they sit within, and whether it's vague or repetitive. We'll also test to see if a phrase will still make sense if we replace the word God with another name, such as your pet Budgie. All this is checked against what we already know are hard limits in the human brain. So this really is a very objective and fact-based test. Let's look at some of the lyrics. If you've been forgiven, if you've been redeemed, sing the song forever to the Lamb. Now this phrase does sound true, but information theory asks a slightly different question. Is there enough data in it without making assumptions to definitively say it is true? In other words, is it a standalone, self-contained truth? The answer to that question for Holy Forever is no. It does identify the state of the worshipper, forgiven. It fails to articulate the gospel basis of that truth. Why are we forgiven? How does that work? Forgiven for what and by whom? Nowhere in the song is that ever answered. This phrase is by nature an open-ended one. If. It's this uncertainty that makes it doctrinally unsound and introduces unwanted noise. There is nothing uncertain about the gospel. Our songs have to follow that example, and Holy Forever does not. It has what is called low entropy, meaning it should be highly predictable, but due to the introduced noise of being vague, it becomes high entropy, having very little actual signal. Like a poorly tuned radio station, it has too much static, and the signal is not clear enough to hear the voices properly. Then we get to the train wreck of the chorus. And the angels cry holy, all creation cries holy. But the song never qualifies the word holy with any context or action. For this to fulfill the regulative principle of worship, there must be an associated action that defines why God is holy. And this really does matter. Note the present tense of this chorus as well. There are many millions of people who actively hate God right now. They are not crying holy to him. So this is at best a hypothetical, future-looking phrase, which is simply not valid to us here and now. So why would we be singing it? It's empty of context and vague, leaving us with more questions than answers. Thus, we can easily substitute the name of God with the universe or even PT. And apart from a single phrase in verse 1, the song will still make sense. That's an act of spiritual vandalism. Now consider what 1 Samuel 12 verse 24 says. Consider what great things he has done for you. An attribute of God must always be followed by how he has shown us that attribute in action. It's his works that ground us in our faith. Those are concrete examples of his power and goodness, and we need that in our lives. Without the action, it's just an abstract concept and unhelpful. Next, we'll look at the word density, which is a pretty useful measure. To really make my point, we'll take a well-known hymn to contrast Holy Forever to. Holy, holy, holy. They both reference Revelation 4 verse 8, so it's a relevant comparison. Holy Forever has about 350 words, and Holy, holy, holy only has 150. You'd naturally conclude that Holy Forever carries more truth, but the exact opposite is true. Holy Forever has a staggering 81% redundancy rate. Those are words that repeat over and over. Holy, holy, holy has a sensible 33% redundancy, which is just about perfect for conveying and reiterating biblical truth in a way that teaches and admonishes us, in keeping with Colossians 3 verse 16. On top of this, Holy Forever has 35% fewer unique ideas, despite having 3 times the words. In fact, as we'll see in stage 5, the word holy is used so many times, it completely loses its meaning and just becomes a mantra. Okay, so we're going to get a bit practical now. I've got my guitar out, and we're going to play through a few bars of the chorus, just to give you a feel for the kind of musical manipulation you expect in this song. I'll demonstrate the chord changes. I won't be singing, I'll be playing very simply, just so we can understand the structure that's behind everything you hear coming from this song. I'm going to replay that clip for you now, and I'm going to pause it on each chord change so I can show you the structure of the music and how the loops are being used to manipulate you and to avoid the tonic as much as possible, which is in itself quite a massive manipulation technique. So you notice the chorus comes in on the fourth with a false start on the tonic. It sort of just passes through that tonic really quickly to get to the fourth. Now this has the effect of building the music and expanding it as if we're doing something with it. It tricks your brain because you'd normally expect the tonic to remain for at least one bar, but it doesn't. So it moves up to the dominant 5, and your brain will expect perfect cadence after this, so we can return back to the tonic, which is that sense of coming home, which is what perfect cadence would give us. But it's very tricky because now we go to the third interval, or I/3, which is almost the tonic but with an F on the bass. This creates quite a strong sense of yearning, and your brain is really storing quite a lot of dopamine by the time we reach this point in the chorus. Now that yearning is ratcheted up even more as we move to the relative minor, or 6, known as the deceptive cadence, precisely because your brain thinks we're going back to the resolution on the tonic, but we're not, and it prolongs your agony even further. So more dopamine gets stored. Now it gets even worse. We move from there to the minor second, still not back at the tonic, so we still got that sense of yearning that's just building, building, building. Lots of dopamine getting stored at this stage. Now this is almost nasty, it's almost cruel. We go through the tonic, just touching on it very briefly, and back to the 5. So back to the dominant puts us back in that sense of tension, and we're looking for release here, but we don't get it. Our brains are screaming for relief by the end of the chorus, and we deny it yet again by ending the chorus on the suspended chord. It's so close, but just so far away from the tonic, and it's only really at the final bar do we get back to the tonic. Of course, only to start again with a verse or a chorus again or another bridge. So this is a highly, highly manipulative technique, and the yearning loop is used far too much in this chorus. The bridge or pre-chorus uses a very similar technique. The musical structure of Holy Forever is truly a masterclass in theta-wave hypnotic induction. And thanks to my litmus test, that's now just a verifiable scientific fact. Our limbic system loves it. Our critical thinking faculties, however, sleep right through it. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 tells us, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." This means we should always be thinking, considering, and discerning. When the limbic system is in control, we're not thinking and we are unable to. Now let's compare Holy Forever to Holy, Holy, Holy. This old hymn is full of harmonic resolutions and the perfect cadence. It is engineered to evoke feelings of stability, awe, and resolution. It is transcendent worship in a way that Chris Tomlin's songs could never be, because it grounds us in truth in our circumstances. It's perfect for the thinking Christian, a far superior congregational song. And that's now no longer an opinion, it's a scientific fact due to my new litmus test. I'll play through a stanza of this and then quickly talk about the musicology of the hymn. The song starts with a major triad, climbing through the third and then onto the fifth. This is a musical sequence that exudes strength, like a solid foundation for the rest of the song to build on, and it's a very bold opening move for a song. There are chord changes on almost every word, which is known as a high harmonic density, which we'll talk more about in a moment. but this is perfect for teaching and admonishing one another, just as Colossians 3 verse 16 commands. It makes good use of the subdominant 4, leading back to the tonic, and it evokes a sense of grand vastness or expansiveness, like a beautiful view of the Alps or the Rockies. There is a definite sense of grandeur when you sing this old hymn. Each opening phrase ends with the perfect cadence. That's the dominant 5 going back into the tonic. This acts like a full stop for our minds, like coming home, allowing us to process the lyrics we've just sung from a place of safety and comfort. The final phrase is known as the Nicaea climax, where the chords cascade down from the highest point back to the tonic. The opening tension is released in the final 3 notes, which perfectly complements the opening major triad. It's glorious, and while Holy Forever is about our experience of God, it's all about us. Holy, Holy, Holy is actually all about God's power and majesty, and it teaches central doctrines of our faith. It's perfect for congregational worship. Cognitive friction is our second last test in the LITMUS framework, and it combines music, psychology, and the vocal range. There are 2 checks we do to test the cognitive friction in Holy Forever. We've already touched on the first one, and that's the harmonic density, which is how many chord changes there are and how often they occur. It's not a case of simply adding more chords. That would obviously just be silly, but it's rather about adding in enough features to the music to keep people engaged and active without confusing them. That's the friction bit. The song must still be singable, however. Holy Forever is, how can I put this kindly, harmonically very spacious. What I mean by that is that it's musically empty, like a deflated balloon the morning after a party. The missing complexity is then substituted by a wall of sound, which is heavy reverb and delay on guitars, multiple synth pads, and big cinematic drums. Couple this with a darkened auditorium, flashing lights and fog machines, and a very high volume, and you have the perfect environment for a theta-wave trance. The wall of sound is a common technique used in secular music to make people feel disembodied, disconnecting their cognitive functions, which would otherwise keep them grounded and in control. And since when should Christians behave this way? Holy Forever is written with cyclical loops. These are just a set of chords that loop around over and over without ever really stopping or resting. Any return to the tonic is usually a false return. In other words, the only time the song returns to the tonic is actually to start another loop again and not end one. Our brains find this so exhausting that they simply disconnect. Firstly, you get what is known as the safety loop, which is what we find in the chorus. And because any returns to the tonic here are false resolutions, you're left adrift on a sea of dopamine. Then you get the yearning loop, which is what we find in the bridge. And this is designed to keep you in a state of yearning, and you can even literally feel yourself physically leaning forward, waiting for the beat to drop. Musically speaking, this just means the phrases are left unresolved. You never get that feeling of returning home to rest and consider the lyrics. Moderate use of these loops is of course acceptable, but Holy Forever misuses them excessively, and that is where they become highly manipulative. Now, the second area of potential friction is the vocal range of the song. All congregational songs must be singable by an untrained congregation. This is just common sense. Otherwise, of course, it's just a performance. Holy Forever has a very wide range, putting some parts of the song outside of the normal range of untrained people, whether men or women. Holy, Holy, Holy sits within a single octave and everyone can reach it. Holy Forever is an octave plus a fourth. This leaves untrained singers screeching out the chorus or completely silent as spectators instead of participants. It's just not a practical song and should fail on those grounds alone. Our final test is about the extent of repetition and if it crosses the line into hypnotic induction, hence the induction zone in the litmus matrix I showed earlier. This is about repetition of both words and musical phrases. Many people try to make excuses for excessive repetition in songs. They'll use examples such as Psalm 136, which repeats the phrase, "For his steadfast love endures forever," at the end of each line, 26 times in total. What they don't realize is that Psalm 136, firstly, is the word of God and is therefore infallible, and our songs are not. The second thing is that there are 2 different kinds of repetition, a good kind and a bad kind. Now, from an information theory perspective, when a new point is being made with each repetition, it's fine. It keeps you engaged because new data is being introduced. Now, under these circumstances, it's actually a very good thing because it really drives that truth home, using repetition as a tool for cognitive friction rather than cognitive decoupling. Psalm 136 is the perfect example of this. So, far from being the gotcha that these people think it is, it's actually the exact opposite. But when repetition does not make a new point or introduce any new data, it's gratuitous and pointless. It quickly reaches a point known in psychology as semantic satiation. This usually happens after about 10 repetitions or within 3 minutes. Now, semantic satiation means there is a point at which repetitive sound loses its meaning. Your brain simply stops processing the information in the words and just treats them as a sound wave or vibration. Understanding stops and your brain flips over from your prefrontal cortex to your limbic system. We'll get a little bit technical here, but stay with me. This is extremely important because it lays bare the manipulation that artists such as Chris Tomlin and the Bethel crowd actively and deliberately use to sell their phony product. In philosophy and semiotics, words are symbols that point to something. They're not just sounds our mouths make or shapes on a page. They have real meaning. Words are building blocks that help us to understand reality. Now, remove words and we cannot think. Or change the words from a symbol to a sound wave, and we also cannot think. Eastern mystics use mantra meditation to achieve a transcendental state. This happens when they repeat words so much that they lose their symbolic meanings and simply become sounds or vibrations. This repetitive chanting stimulates the vagus nerve, making our brains shift from beta waves to alpha or theta waves, from the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala. Under this trance, auditory and visual hallucinations occur, and the practitioner loses all sense of self. This person becomes very malleable, highly suggestible, and extremely vulnerable to manipulation of their beliefs, as well as even from demonic influences. They are, by definition, not of sound mind, which is completely unbiblical. To bring in psychology, dual process theory suggests that human thinking operates through two distinct, often competing systems. Type 1 thinking is intuitive and fast, it's reactive, while type 2 thinking is deliberate and slow, methodical, calculated. According to scripture, we should always be thinking and discerning, and not merely reacting in the moment. So naturally, we should be singing songs that allow for type 2 and avoid songs that focus only on type 1. Sustained rhythmic repetition exhausts and bypasses the type 2 analytical system. As your brain hits semantic satiation, it stops object-level processing. This results in what is known as an emotional cognitive decoupling, which is a psychological state where your emotional experience becomes temporarily separated from cognitive awareness and discernment. Nothing destroys a Christian's focus on Christ quicker than a lack of discernment. So, any music that does this is obviously to be avoided entirely. To bring in neurochemistry to support the psychology, your critical thinking abilities sit in your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is the brain's dominant system when we read our Bibles and think. However, when we sing Holy Forever or any of the other slop that the worship industrial complex produces, the limbic system takes over and dominates our brain function. This has been medically proven via scans, and the limbic system is the part of your brain responsible for the intense and seemingly inexplicable supernatural experiences that go on in these services. Things such as what might be called the spirit falling, or even visions and so-called prophetic insights. It's not the Holy Spirit, it's your own brain doing this to you. And we need to stop. Our churches need to stop subjecting us to this nonsense. It is distracting us from what God would be saying to us through His Word. We are also building bad spiritual habits into our day-to-day behaviors that ensure we miss out on what we should be enjoying in our fellowship, both with God and with one another. Colossians 3 verse 16 tells us very clearly, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God." We are not permitted to allow our minds to be overthrown by musical gimmickry or manipulation. We are commanded to be sober-minded at all times, precisely because there are evil people who serve the devil, and they are constantly trying to fool us and make us stop thinking. When they tell you to stop thinking, think all the harder. Now for the analysis part of this stage. The bridge and chorus cycles of Holy Forever exceed 10 repetitions in standard church performances, and the word holy is repeated so many times it far surpasses the satiation border. This is a definite clinical trigger for theta-wave dominance, putting your brain into an actual trance. Don't kid yourself, you cannot prevent this from happening. It's the way your brain works. The only choice is to avoid the song completely. In a theta-wave trance, it has been shown that people lose their sense of self as well as any external perception. In simple terms, you feel like you've become one with your room, and your church is one organism synchronized to the music, praising something. But is that something dopamine or God? I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but you've been duped. Our brains have been biohacked, hijacked by an insidious evil, the worship industrial complex. Holy Forever is just one cog in this huge infernal machine. Cast the song out of your sanctuaries and return to the pure scriptural worship of the one true God. It seems unnecessary to say it, but the LITMUS framework shows that Holy Forever sits well within the induction quadrant and should be marked and avoided, along with all of Chris Tomlin and Bethel music, due to the heretical associations. The words of the song are vague and only superficially Christian, while the music is extremely hypnotic, inflaming the passions rather than moving the affections. Holy Forever fails every single test on my LITMUS framework. This is in stark contrast to Holy, 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 which sits high up in the anchor quadrant. So, replace Holy Forever with Holy, Holy, Holy in your church this Sunday, and watch your people genuinely worship God in spirit and truth, leaving the sanctuary energized, refreshed in truth, and hopeful for the week ahead. I've got a long list of songs that I want to get through. I want to analyze and put them into the LITMUS framework and see how they come out. They're pretty much going to be the top 20 of the CCLI lists. So those are the main songs being sung by churches all over the world every single Sunday. Also, the LITMUS framework comes from my upcoming book, which is called Purity in the Church, Exposing the Modern Downgrade. It's chapter 5 of the book, and I go into even more detail there as well to cover some of the history around these songs and the music in our church and why we sing the way we sing now. So watch out for that release coming up soon.